At this time, I'll call the January 18th, 2022 council meeting to order. At this time, I'll recognize Robert Winkler in District 3, who will lead us in invocation and pledge of allegiance.
Thank you. Lord, we thank you this evening for the opportunity to get together. We thank you for the linemen and first responders that were out in this weather we had over the weekend, keeping our power up or getting it back up and keeping us safe with everything going on. We ask for your hand over them the coming weekend, as it looks like we may have round two. We thank you for all the blessings you give us. We ask you for wisdom tonight as we go through council business to make the best decisions that are before us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and
to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, if the following individuals would come forward for the oath of office to boards and commissions: Philip Keenan, Board of Assessment Appeals, District 7, Johnny Walker, York County Forever, District 5, Debbie Cloninger, Planning Commission at Large, and Ellen Goff, Bethel Fire Tax District Board. If you'll come forward and meet our attorney up front, and as you make your way here, it's important, and I know I expressed this from all of the council, we appreciate each one of you for agreeing to step up and serve in these various capacities on a volunteer basis. It's oftentimes a thankless job. It certainly is not a paying gig, and so we want to, first of all, just say thank you for your service to our community. We appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. I should have sentiments and thank you for your service to our county. We couldn't operate as well as we do without some of us. So if you each raise your right hand, you have to me, I'm given the privilege to apply the oath of office to him. Some of you are serving against also. And you solemnly swear that you will be qualified according to the Constitution of this state, to exercise the duties of the office to which I have been appointed. I will, to the best of my ability, discharge the duties thereof, and preserve, protect, and defend. The Constitution of this state. And of the United States. So help me God. Congratulations again. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I'll recognize Tim Grow with Elliott Davis to provide the audit presentation.
Good evening, council members. Thanks for the opportunity to come and present the results of the audit of financial statements, as it says, for the year ended June 30, 2021. My name's Tim Grow, and I have with me tonight Melissa Monahan, who is the manager on the engagement. As typical, she did the heavy lifting, and I'm here to take credit for it. So there's a disclaimer. I did want to start by just a general overview. For those who don't know, this is actually the first year that Elliott Davis has done the audit of York County. And there are many years things are challenging. Obviously, this year was right up there. Not only did we have to deal with the effects of COVID, we had a lot of changes that I'll talk briefly about, but some of the challenges that some of those changes brought. And I guess I'd say this as it relates to the county. One of the things that particularly challenging from a planning perspective was you have an exceptional staff. I'll start with that. Auditing starts the minute we get engaged, and when I say the minute we get engaged, as we propose on an engagement such as this, we're certainly highly cognizant of the staff and their capabilities and qualifications. It also brings some challenges, particularly when folks on your staff that have done exactly what I do. So they know what I'm going to be looking for. So I have an obligation to figure out how to trip them up to a certain extent. Now, some of those things we can't do because we've got to spend a certain amount of time on things that they know we're going to test. So But to start with, the objective of this audit, as with all audits, is the issuance of an opinion about whether your financial statements are free from material misstatement. Now, material misstatement, I'll talk a little bit more in just a second. But I will say that anything that we asked for, we received. When I mentioned before, auditing starts almost immediately. One of the things that we look for in a relationship is how eager or how qualified the answers are given. If there's hemming and hawing, or if there's not easy, free access to the information we're looking for. We didn't have any of those situations. Your staff is exceptional. They met us at every turn. One of the things that we look for when we enter into an engagement is how proactive our management in, the thing about governmental accounting, accounting is tough. Governmental accounting is accounting on steroids. It's even more complicated. So as with any relationship, we're looking for that relationship where management will reach out to us, where we can have discussions about technical issues. And one of the things that I admired particularly about your staff, we're talking about planning issues. So not only are we talking about issues that are currently facing the county, but that we're talking about issues that are facing the county over the next several years. I'll follow these slides a little bit. You have two documents in front of you. One of them is the large audit engagement. This is the document that was presented to us, and this is the document we audited. All we add in here is 3 opinions, and I'll talk about those in a second. The second document is our official communication to council. Many moons ago, we could do this communication verbally, but through several accounting failures, it was an obligation that we communicate those more in writing. And so we'll talk a little bit about kind of the process we go through as we do an audit. The thing about financial records is numbers sometimes aren't enough. In note 1 to the financial statements, we go into some detail, or the county goes into some detail describing its policies and procedures, how it accounts for things. And one of our charges is to determine whether those disclosures are adequate for a user of the financial statement to be able to glean from the financial statement the information it needs to make decisions. And our obligation is to vet those communications, determine whether we would come to the same conclusion, and we were able to do that. The county did implement GASB 84, which related to fiduciary activities. It did not change total balance, but it changed how some of those balances were, what fund they were accounted for. Significant estimates. Every financial statement is embedded with a certain number of estimates. And one of the things that we do as part of an audit is determine whether we would come to the same conclusion that management came to as it relates to some of those estimates. For example, sometimes some of those estimates can be for pension and OPEB, how the estimated life expectancy of the people that are going to be served from the OPEB and pension funds. We did not find any of those estimates or assumptions that we would come to a different conclusion. So we felt very comfortable with the conclusions that management came to. One of the things that we also do is we assess management's competency is we determine whether we had any uncorrected or corrected misstatements. Oftentimes, and usually when we go through an audit, we will find adjustments that we have to make to the books and records. We did not have any adjustments, any audit adjustments, either posted or unposted, which kind of goes back to what I said before about the competency of your staff. There are 3 opinions that we issued, I mentioned before, as a result of this audit. One is on the financial statements as a whole, whether that we felt like they were materially correct. The second, because we do this audit under governmental auditing standards, we're required to consider your system of internal control as we go through our processes and procedures. That doesn't mean we necessarily audit your system of control, but we become highly aware of it as we do some of our testing, determine whether we can come to the same conclusions through your control systems or whether we feel like we can rely on some of those. Now, some of them we did test, but we did not test every control, which is why we don't issue an opinion on controls. But we're obligated to point out if we run into control issues as we go through our processes. There are 3 types of control deficiencies which are covered on the slide in just a second. Material weaknesses are the most severe, meaning if this misstatement or this control is not corrected, your financial statements are likely to be misstated. You didn't have any material weaknesses. The second is significant deficiencies, which aren't as severe as material weakness, but we know if we have enough significant deficiencies or significant deficiencies are allowed to go on long enough, they may ultimately lead to a misstatement. You didn't have any significant deficiencies. The final are control deficiencies, which are recommendations that we would make to just improve your system of internal control. We had a couple of minor ones that we discussed with management, but they're, as I said, recommendations for improvement. The third opinion, because you receive federal funding, we're obligated to conduct what's known as a single audit and issue a single audit opinion, which means we audit your federal programs under a different set of standards than our typical Yellow Book standards. All three opinions were unmodified, and unmodified in accounting speak means they were the highest level of assurance we can provide, which means we agree with management's assertions on not only your financial statements, but the system of internal control and your federal funding. This is the Yellow Book slide I mentioned earlier, and here's the three types of control deficiencies I mentioned earlier. I'm also required to go through a couple of things. As we start an audit, we sit down and we go through a planning process. That planning process includes where we assess risks. We assess risks based on what we know about the county, which is unusual, which may be akin to other counties or different risks this county may have that are unlike risks of other counties. We know that most South Carolina counties have very similar risks. Some are unusual, but we, as we start our planning process, we consider some of those as we form our audit plan. The other thing we do is we interview management, which either affirms our audit plan or requires us to alter our audit plan. Everything we expected to happen did happen. We didn't run into anything that we were unexpected. Management was very forthcoming in all challenges, and we were very happy with the results of those inquiries. We're not aware that management consulted with any other accountants. They were very honest. As I said before, one of the things that we look for when we get management's responses is how eager, how quickly they respond, and how knowledgeable they are in the responses to our questions. We were met at every turn with what we expected to happen. We didn't identify anything unusual. There were no disagreements with management, no unusual transactions other than the COVID money, which presented a different set of audit challenges that we were able to determine the county is complying with all those requirements currently. We didn't have anything significantly difficult that we ran into as we conducted the audit. Every audit has pivots and turns as we go through it. As our initial risk assessments, when we get into the numbers, we might find different balances that we want to test. Now, I mentioned the materiality. We don't audit every transaction in the county. We develop a materiality threshold. The materiality threshold is our guidance internally about any balance above our materiality threshold we certainly want to get comfortable with. Any balance below that, we want to sample test because we want to give every transaction the opportunity to be tested. In addition to all this, we actually require management to represent to us that they provided us anything, they didn't withhold anything. That communication is also included in your packet. Management provided those representations. We were very happy with the results. And also in addition is any communication that we had with management is included, which includes our engagement letter that is also in that packet. Very happy with the results of the audit. I've mentioned before how easy your staff was to work with. My staff was eagerly wanted me to make that point with council that it went really well. So I'll pause there for any questions that anybody has.
Any questions from council?
Yeah, I do have one quick question.
Mr. Audit?
Yeah, thank you. So from a state and federal perspective, you know, each year when they look at, you know, when the county or when audits are completed, the requirements from the state and the Fed, what do you see that's new And what do you see on the horizon that may be coming in your requirements when you do an audit?
Well, this coming year, we'll have the lease implementation that will be required. And the lease implementation is going to require all leases to be booked onto the balance sheet, which is different than anything we've done in the past. From a federal perspective, those requirements, particularly as it relates to COVID, are changing as we speak. As a matter of fact, I had one county that I didn't issue. We waited for some additional guidance to come out, and I believe that guidance is going to continue to change. What's recently come out seems to provide a little bit more flexibility and some of the COVID money. But quite honestly, the COVID money, it has a wide expanse of allowable expenditures. So I think you won't have any challenges meeting the requirements to spend those. There are a couple other GASBs that are coming out over the next several years, but none as significant as the lease standard.
Lease, okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Any other questions? Mr. Roddy?
I just want to, we just got handed this big thing, report, and I was kind of stumbling through. I would like to go to the unassigned fund balance. That kind of shows where we are as a county. These monies are not being committed to anything. This is money that we can kind of, at liberty, if something came up, we can cover the costs or start a project. If tax money hadn't come in, we can still continue to pay our bills. How would you, and I know I see we have we're at $30 million unassigned. That's pretty good, right? Where do we stack up with other counties throughout the state with having this kind of reserves or unassigned fund balance? You
have an exceptional fund balance policy. I'll start with there because we always want every county to have a solid fund balance policy. And a fund balance policy it's good to have a level that you want to reserve as unassigned fund balance for a number of reasons, which I'm sure you're familiar with. The policy also includes a way to fund that policy if you were able to ever required to dip below. Depends on who you ask what's the right amount. I personally say a minimum of 2 months worth of general fund expenditures at a minimum. I think 3 months is probably where, and I think your policy is 25%, which is right in line with that. I would say that as it relates to South Carolina counties, you're in the top 10%. A lot of counties wish they were in the position that and have the healthy fund balance, which provides you a lot of flexibility and a lot of latitude. I know recently, the federal government has jumped in and been willing to, to provide some funding. I've been doing this long enough to know that that's not always been the case. So I think maintaining a healthy fund balance I don't know how you operate a county without it. So I think it's really solid. That's my opinion.
Now GASB recommends how much, what's the policy if we were just going by?
GASB doesn't have, GFOA, Government Finance Officers Association, has a minimum, they suggest a minimum of 2 months general fund expenditures, which is basically 16% as a minimum.
And I just want to point out for the record that we still have a good, strong bond rating with Moody's. We're really good, really good. And
it matters. I know interest rates are low right now. Interest rates don't always stay low. So when your bond rating is as strong as it is, you definitely want to do the things to maintain that bond rating.
Any other questions? Still. Mr. Madden, any comments from you?
No, ma'am. We knew getting Elliott Davis in this year would be a bit of a challenge. I think the staff embraced that and, made a point to try to be as responsive as we could be. Elliott Davis looked at things differently from Greenfield and Horton. I personally am very happy with the results. You're always a little nervous. You got somebody new coming to look at your books. Very happy with the work that Elliott Davis provides. They're not what I'd call a report writer. They actually drill down in and look at the facts and look at the numbers and do test work, which we appreciate. We know we're not perfect and want to have those things checked. That's part of the reason the evaluation committee selected Elliott Davis was, their references echoed those same thoughts. They came in and gave us a real audit, and that's what we want to have at Greenfield and Horton.
Any other questions from council?
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
I understand we do not have anyone signed up for the public forum. Committee and other reports. Zoning Committee, Ms. Love.
The zoning committee met on January the 11th, and present were Councilman Roddy, Guffey, and myself. And we just had one thing on our agenda, and that was to discuss some of the details of the nuisance ordinance. And so we had a very brief meeting. Just a couple minutes.
All right, and that was to also review the, consistent with our code, the referring the nuisance ordinance to you.
Yes.
Okay. And the recommendation out of that was to approve
Yes.
with this amendment? Okay. Mr. Winkler?
All right. Thank you. Finance and Operations Committee met this afternoon, or this evening at 5:30. Present were Councilmembers Love, Hamilton, and myself. We took up some applications for service for Keep York County Beautiful, and we recommend Kristen Kelly and Tabitha Jeffries for 2 open at-large seats. Then we looked at Bethel Lake Wiley Land Acquisition and Preservation Park District, and we recommended the reappointment of Ann Violante for a second term in that. And then we had a short finance update. Basically, we were told that the auditor would be presenting tonight, and that unfortunately vacancies are still a little higher than where we would like them to be, which is what I hear from every business owner and everybody I talk to around right now. So, and that was it.
Thank you, Mr. Winkler. Do we have a motion on consent agenda?
Would like to make a motion to pull out number 9.
Okay, we'll move number 9 to I know it's going to old business, but I can't turn the pages. Do we have it listed?
We have old business is on starting, well, it's listed on the bottom of 14, but it actually starts on 15, page 15. So it'd be old business.
Yep, number 4. Old business 4. Number 9 from consent will be moved to there. Anyone else have something to remove from consent?
Move to approve with number 9, remove the old business number 4.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. We move now to our first public hearing. Council to hold a public hearing and provide third reading of an ordinance authorizing the execution and delivery of a fee in lieu of tax agreement by and between York County, South Carolina and Samuel Son and Company USA, a company previously identified as Project SEMA, with respect to certain economic development property in the county whereby such property will be subject to certain payments in lieu of taxes and other matters relating thereto. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak in favor? And if you would, just please state your name and address in connection to.
Thank you. My name is Cy Slivka Jr. I'm the president of Samuel, and I'm with my colleague, Steve Forster. He's the director of plastics operations. And to give you a little history, I'm coming to you out of Chicago, and I've been coming to this part of the world since 1995, where I had my first hit of Sonny's barbecue and have been addicted ever since. Chicago has a lot of things, but they don't have a Sonny's barbecue. Steve has been here 20 years. I'm in my 31st year. We have a lot of tenured employees. Samuel is a family-owned business, started in 1855. And I know that Fort Mill was incorporated right around 1873, about 18 years after that. So I did a little bit of homework. When we first arrived here in 1995, we had about 50,000 square feet, a couple production lines, and about 25 employees. Today, through this partnership, we have over 200,000 square feet, close to 100 employees, and we've just ordered an additional production line, our 5th production line. And my plans are to continue to grow our business. There is a global demand. We used to just have this nice little niche. We are now selling these products in Brazil, Africa, Australia, China, and it's due to the quality and the workmanship that we get out of this area. As a division of Samuel, we have about 102 locations. And as a president, I compete for CapEx money each and every year. Samuel, last year during COVID, spent more money investing in its plants than it ever has in its history. $11 million of that came to our Fort Mill facility, which we are very pleased. It does set the stage for additional production lines. The ones that we have are getting up in age, and the technology continues to evolve over time. So our ability to produce faster, less expensive product helps us compete globally. Samuel invests where we have success, and we have success in partnerships. So I'll pause there and ask if there's any questions that I could field.
Typically, during our public hearings, we just hear from
do
you, so we
not?
don't ask questions. And
Okay.
we've received the information beforehand.
Oh, okay,
We appreciate
fair
your
enough.
comments.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your time.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in favor? Is there anyone who wishes to speak against?
Move to close.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to close public hearing. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Do we have a new motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve. Any discussion?
I would just like to say, thank you for what you're doing for creating jobs in the community, and I appreciate what you guys are doing to advance. Thank you.
All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Thank you again for your investment, and we appreciate and look forward to working with you and are excited to see that your business is continuing to thrive and expand. Now we move to old business. First item in old business, council to consider reading of an ordinance to repeal and replace chapters 154 of the Subdivision Code and 155 of the Zoning Code to adopt a new zoning map which renames certain zoning districts, provides for new zoning districts, consolidates the AGC 1 and AGC districts into a single AGC district, and consolidates the RUD 1 and RUD districts into a single RUD district. To relocate section 154.038 development agreements to chapter 153, planning and development, to relocate certain code sections pertaining to tax districts from the zoning code to chapter 35, taxation and finance, to approve the York County Land Development Manual related to the implementation of the requirements of chapter 154, to provide for a public hearing and to provide for other matters relating thereto.
Move to approve. Second. Move to amend the second reading with the following amendments. Section 155.152 regarding classification of new and unlisted uses be removed entirely, and a new paragraph G be added to section 155.151 that states unlisted uses prohibited. Any use not listed for applicable zoning district in the use table is prohibited. Part 2, administrative adjustments to the zoning code, subchapter E, procedures must be removed entirely. Next, Part 4, preliminary plats of the Land Development Code, subchapter G, procedures be revised to change the decision body back to the Planning Commission. 4, section 155.153, use table be revised to remove townhomes as permitted use in the RMX 20 district and the RMX 10 district. Next, Part 1, general provisions of the Land Code Development, subchapter B, subdivision and site design standards be revised to add an additional section that states site alteration. Infrastructure shall be designed to minimize the alteration of the site topography. Infrastructure shall accommodate natural grades to the maximum feasible extent, minimize the removal of existing ground cover and subsoil, and minimize the importation of fill material. Next, section 155.153, use table shall be revised to list liquor sales as a distinct retail use permitted in the GC district and to create a corresponding definition for liquor sales in zoning code. Subchapter J, definitions and acronyms. Next, subpart 3.37, tiny homes, and subchapter C, use regulations of the zoning code shall be removed entirely, and all applicable sections of the zoning code should be revised to remove tiny houses, excuse me. Section 154.063B1 regarding additional sidewalk construction requirements be revised to reduce the distance from public school that requires an external sidewalk from 1 1/2 miles to 1/2 mile. The land development manual be revised to not require any newly created inspection types or newly created post-construction requirements through March 1st, 2023 for any project that has approved civil construction plans as of the effective date of the revised land development code. Next, part 2, base districts of the zoning code, subchapter B, zoning districts, and all other related portions of the code be revised to restore the existing AGC 1 and RUD 1 zoning districts, reversing their proposed consolidation with AGC and RUD zoning districts respectively. Section 155.153, use table, be revised to remove manufactured homes as a conditional use in the RSF 40 district. Subsection 155.7181A, the word "and" be changed to "or" at the end of the subsection line regarding necessary resolutions. And subsection 155.7182, the office of the county attorney be added after zoning administrator in the sentence pertaining to providing recommendations on text amendments. I'll take a breath.
Thank you, Mr. Winkler. Do we have a second on the amendment?
Second.
Is there any discussion on the amendment? And the way this process will work is we have the main motion that exists, but we are now going to discuss solely the amendments, if there are any questions, or we will vote on the amendments and move on to any other amendments.
I just want to get clarification, first of all, on the classification of new and unlisted uses being prohibited from legal. The purpose of us doing that, if there is something new, such as the internet, coming along after we did our recode last time, or setting up our ordinances before, what do we do in that case?
You would move to amend the ordinance to allow the new uses being pervasive throughout the nation or the state that you want addressed.
Okay.
That way it provides for a new use. The historic dilemma we've confronted here is that this current ordinance is over 20 years old. So a lot of the uses have not been addressed or attended to over time, but this comprehensive rezoning now includes presumably uses that are up to date, up to modern times. So we're at a nice starting point. So if we're aware of trends and uses, we can amend the ordinance to add that.
So that the council would have the ability to do
Yes,
so, as
absolutely.
opposed to just allowing
Yes.
zoning to do it. Okay. Thank you.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, so the removal of townhomes out of MRX 20 and MRX 10 I think is a critical move. That would allow just MRX 6 for townhomes and apartments to be together in that district. I think that's a very important move in regards to this, and it would keep it to one district, townhomes and apartments all in one district.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of the amendment, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the main motion is now amended to include those changes.
I'd like to offer an amendment to that now, to section 154.103A2 to be revised that at least 40% of required open space must be comprised of dry land with a slope less than 15%. And section 154.102, minimum amount of open space required be revised to include an exemption from the open space requirement for properties which are zoned RUD or RUD1 and lie within the urban services boundary, but they are refused water and sewer services from the closest provider of each in writing.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on these second set of amendments. Is there any discussion?
I'd like to
Mr. Winkler.
just offer my reasonings for these. One, in the workshop, y'all heard me discuss the slope. And it's been said that some of our surrounding areas allow slope up to 25%, but I felt like that's too much of a slope allowance. That's pretty hard to walk on or do anything else with that, even though we've got quite a bit of that going into creek beds and things around here. So I felt like a 10% was a little too low a slope and 15% was a good compromise. That's still, from the research I've done, still walkable and still something that could be done. And then the open space requirement, that's a very limited thing, but we found that there are about a year and a half ago, we revised this to cover properties that were in the urban service boundary, because the thought is that they should have water and sewer available to them inside the urban service boundary. But we're finding that there are some properties that the service providers are refusing to provide service to. And in that case, I don't feel we should be holding them to the standard as if they had water and sewer provided to them. So that's my reason for these two. I think this is a small step toward what we need to eventually do, which is figure out how to do a lot more developments in our area that use a lot more green development, that type of thing. But this is just two small things I'd like to offer.
Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, so in regards to homes being built on 1 acre or 2 acre properties, as we look to move towards very low density development, I think there's a lot of things to look at from that perspective. I think that overall, I think there's a larger discussion needed around this area and how we would work with those type of custom builders on 1 to 2 acre lots. I feel that this is a conversation and a step that needs to be a broader conversation. I think this is something that we should carry on possibly after the coding, and I'm not sure if we should make it part of the coding discussion, but I think we should carry it on to be a larger discussion around how we want to work with those custom builders on 1 to 2 acre lots. I think this takes one step towards it in the discussion, but I don't know, again, the total impact of what is being suggested. So I think, to me, I think I'd rather wait to have a broader discussion around this and the impact of it as a holistic conversation on how we want to work with them. So that would be my thoughts.
Are we talking about this?
Mr. Roddy?
Are we talking about the slopes?
Yeah, the two amendments.
I had a question. I wanted to get staff's recommendation on that. I know everybody was at the workshop last week, but we never asked staff what did they think about allowing a greater slope versus what staff had already recommended. The staff support going up to 15%, because I know, and this kind of got just sprung on us tonight. I'd like to hear from staff on allowing slopes up to 15% when.
I'll say that staff doesn't necessarily have a vetted opinion between the difference between a 10% slope and a 15% slope, other than to say that 10% would be much more walkable than 15%. And the intent behind the requirement, and for full knowledge of the requirement that we're talking about, for developments that require open space, 40% of the open space that they provide has to be this slope 10% or less. So in theory, the intent behind that is to have some minimum requirement of your open space be walkable. So for example, if you had a 100 acre property, you developed it, it needs 20 acres of open space. Of that 20 acres, 8 acres need to have the 10% or lower than 10% slope, so that it's usable. You can have people be on it and enjoy it without having to maneuver through difficult terrain and slope. So I'll say that the maximum slope that's allowed for residential roads, just for example, if you're going to build a new road in a new subdivision, would be 12%. And I think it's a little bit lower than that for commercial because of the load requirements. But happy to answer any other questions you might have.
So the slope of a road is capped maximum at 12%.
That's correct.
And so Robert's wanting to allow a house to be built on property with a slope of 15%.
No, the houses can be built on a bigger slope. This is just the open space area that
Okay,
would allow that.
open space area, okay.
Right.
Gotcha. Well, I'm glad I asked that question, because I was trying to picture the land of a house on a slope like this, but the road's like this, so, okay, all right, gotcha.
You'd have that walkout basement right there. There you go.
So I'm just gonna say that I feel like that of 100 acres, they have to have, so how many acres of green space is required, Jonathan? The total? 20%. So of the 20 acres, all of that could be sloped. So all this 10% is requiring is that 8 of those acres be a more flat surface than, I mean, what we call walkable, because a lot of, I mean, the other 12 acres, they could be at a big slope. But, you know, if kids are going to go out and throw a football or, you know, throw a frisbee for a dog, I feel like that should be as flat an area that makes sense in these neighborhoods. And, you know, a lot of these neighborhoods, we're not just talking about neighborhoods that are full of kids. We're talking about age-restricted neighborhoods where the people are elderly. So I'm going to stick with the 10%. I even think the 10% is a little bit high, but I'm going to support the 10%. I think 15 is too steep. It's hard to say. I can't even say it. See, but I just feel like that's a little bit too steep, and we're only talking about the 8% of that. So the other thing is that I feel like we all agreed. That we wanted staff to look at something for low impact developments. We have a lot of well, we don't have a lot. We have a few really good home builders that are developing on acre plus lots. And quite frankly, we have decentivized them over the years. And so when this first came up, we were talking about the green space, and we were looking at that for RUD, RUD1, and it came up that maybe we should just do that within the USB, and I don't agree with that either. So I feel like that I agree with Tom that it's a bigger discussion that needs to be had, because when we say, okay, we're going to allow these developments that are outside, that are inside the urban surface boundaries, that have been denied water and sewer, we're going to allow them, we're going to give them an exception. I feel like we're kind of going backwards, because quite frankly, we don't know who those developers are that are being, not allowed. So I just feel like we should encompass all of this. It's not that I don't agree with the benefit of it. I just want to be sure that it's benefiting those that we want to incentivize. And I think that we should look at including all of this in the low impact development ordinance, and that, we shouldn't wait around to do that. But at this point, I'm not in favor of doing it as part of the overall ordinance, because I just think it opens up a door that we've tried to close for the betterment of York County.
Any other questions?
I would like to say one thing. As far as the open space requirement, I wasn't on council whenever we were implementing that. But I certainly understand the purpose of that. Whenever it comes to the 15% grade, with me being in landscaping for so long, 15% grade is not very steep at all. It is fully walkable. I would say the majority of the homes that I know of in the Rock Hill area, unless they were built in a flat subdivision, have a 15% grade. So I don't think that's too much of an ask there.
And I'd just like to say, I think just saying, in deference to Jonathan, who's a big help, and he's always been open to us, but I think just saying that, it's 20% of, 40% of the 20% is a little bit of an oversimplification when it comes to developing these subdivisions and stuff, because you've got to have, according to our code, open space has to be 4 separate areas. So we're not just talking about one area that can be 8 acres that can be off, only 10%. We're talking about there's got to be 4 separate areas in the code for that.
Sorry, Mr. Winkler, you're referring to tree save.
Okay.
So tree save needs to be 4
Okay.
separate areas,
All
open
right.
space does not.
I stand corrected on that then. But when we talk about open space, I believe we do still have to take into account all the roads and everything else that takes away some of that property that can be used. Because that does not count as open space when it's roads, sidewalks, and other stuff. And that is walkable open area, but that's not part of what counts as open space. So, there's a lot more goes into it than just that. And so I'm trying to simplify that a little bit if I can. I agree, we still need to continue to work toward some other things, but I think that's why I'm doing this. There's a little more to it than that. And so I think this is a step in the right direction for some of our local builders to be able to build some of what we're looking for.
Any other questions from anyone else? I would like to know what management's recommendation and legal's comment on that. On the other amendments that we had, those were all approved by both of you. I guess I would like to hear your thoughts on it.
Are you talking about the last two?
Yes, these two.
I think really those really discretion of council. I mean, I think the intent of the 10% grade is to have something that's walkable, and I think maybe some of us disagree on what's walkable or not. I mean, without everybody trying to go out there and experience what a 10% grade is, we may not come to the same conclusion. I don't know that it's markedly different to have change that requirement to 15%. So I would just say that's really kind of something we'd leave up to council's discretion. I think the intent of the ordinance is to have open space and have a certain amount of it that is enjoyable for an activity. So it's up to you to determine whether a 10% does that or a 15% does that, in my opinion. As to the other urban services boundary, again, I think we have implemented certain things to be approved within the urban services boundary. You get Jonathan, maybe you could help me. The difference between what we're allowing in the USB and if it's outside of the USB would be what?
So if properties zoned RUD are outside of the USB, they are not required to provide open space. Those within the USB are required to provide open space.
So again, I think that's really kind of council discretion. That's a provision we made when we adopted the open space ordinance.
I'd like to, can I add one thing, please?
Sure, Ms. Love.
So I think Jonathan summed up something that's very important, especially in a district like District 2, District 1, that's pretty full. So our urban service boundaries will move more quickly than some. And so what happens is when the change that was made to what was originally intended for that is that when we said we're going to include we're going to make this for all of those that are within the urban service boundaries. So what that is a little bit short-sighted, because what it does is it means that those things that are being developed outside of that can develop without the green space, without the open space. And if it was so important to us to have in the urban service boundaries, why would it not be important to know that when that urban service boundary is extended, that those developments are also going to be what we wanted within the urban service boundary? I don't look at, I think we look at it, I look at this like the county, my district, abuts Robert's district, but I don't look at it as district versus district. I look at it as we all represent the people of York County. And I feel kind of the same way about urban service boundaries. Those people that live outside the urban service boundaries, they're going to want those neighborhoods that are adjacent to them to have green space too. So it's something that was very much needed in particular areas of the county maybe. And we put that in place, and then we watered that down a little bit when we said, okay, let's just make this, let's just make this applicable to those that are in the urban service boundaries. So I think the way we go back and fix that and adjust that now is with the low impact development ordinance that we've all asked for. But in the meantime, I don't see that we should. Quite frankly, I don't see that we should water down what we've spent a lot of time doing. Michael Johnson and I spent 3.5 years working on this green space ordinance, and I feel like we've watered it down a little bit. And a 15 degree slope is more than what a lot of people want to get out and walk around on. So I just think we have to consider all of that. And if it's part of the low impact development ordinance, it gives us a little more time to consider it, talk about it, and actually see some examples of what that looks like. And it means that what's inside the urban service boundaries is just as important for us to manage as future growth area in the county as for us to manage what's outside the urban service boundary is just as important for us to manage as what's inside the urban service boundary. And in a district like mine and Tom's, where things are happening really quickly, I think it's very important. It's even more important.
Do you mind if I?
Mr. Audit.
Yeah, real quick. First of all, I appreciate what Robert's doing, in regards to these amendments. I know that the conversation we had was that, when we look at these developers and the developers that are looking to develop, what we would be looking for on 1 to 2 acre lots, I think there's a open-ended discussion that needs to be done. I think that it's important to go through that. I think when I look at both of these, I think I'm not as concerned about one as I would be about the amendment to the urban service boundaries, because again, I think a lot of these things were designed and developed, again, a little ways back, and I think that this type of amendment, where it may be very good, I think we need to have further discussion around it, because there's probably other components of it that we need to look at from a holistic standpoint. So again, that would be my reiteration to it.
Just one quick thing. There's no reason for me to keep saying the same things over and over. We'll all vote how we're going to vote in a minute, and we can't keep doing that. But I will say, and Jonathan, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the 10% has been in our code for quite some time, but has not been enforced. So that makes me wonder if it's not been enforced, why is planning and zoning not enforced it? Did we feel like it was not the right percentage? And again, you can't answer that. You weren't here that long. You haven't been here that long. But that's one of the things that makes me wonder about that is if it's not been enforced in the past, then why not? Did we in the past feel as staff that 10% was not the right percentage and we shouldn't be enforcing it? Because we've just recently started enforcing it. And the other thing is, as you get into our area, my area especially, there are a lot more creeks, watersheds, and other things, and those have a lot higher slope, kind of like in the TKK area. I feel like we need to allow some of that with the slope to be part of the open space, because we don't want to start pushing developers into infringing on our creeks and watersheds and stuff to try to squeeze a little bit more open space out of somewhere else. And again, when we are somewhere that they do not have water and sewer, you can't do the smaller lots that is required a lot of times inside urban service boundary. They have to do larger lots to do oil and septic, which means it's a little harder to get that open space sometimes, especially when you got hills and everything else. So that's my reasoning for it. But again, we've talked about it. I'm not going to keep rehashing the same things. We'll vote on it and it'll pass or it won't. So.
All right. Any other questions or comments from other council members? I guess I'll just comment. I'm struggling with this one. We workshopped the others and we haven't really drilled down. I know that Robert did mention this in our workshop, but we didn't drill down on it and discuss it. One of the questions that we did ask at our workshop is how long would it take, and we asked direction from management to have the low impact discussion. Have y'all put any thought into that as to how long that's going to take and how much time you think that's going to take?
We haven't discussed it any further, but I would put a 60 to 90 day time frame on that.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
Is it possible to separate these out and then us to push forward for the low impact development ordinance? Because I think one is more important than the other as far as being able to get at least the majority of council to agree with, as opposed to bundling them together if we're pushing for a low impact ordinance.
I'll defer to chairwoman or legal, because I was just trying to save us some time by putting them both together, but obviously that didn't work, so. I'm open to an amendment to separate them or however.
You could certainly pull them out separately and vote on them one by one.
Okay.
If you would just amend your motion to include the first one and then the second one.
Then, hopefully this will not take too much longer, but then I will amend my motion to just include the first one, which is the adjustment of 154.103A2 to revise state at least 40% of required open space must be comprised of dry land with a slope less than 15%.
Do we have a second? Motion is second on the slope change. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes 6-1.
All right. Then the next one is motion to amend section 154.102, minimum amount of open space required to be revised to include an exemption from the open space requirement for those properties which are zoned RUD or RUD1 and lie within the urban services boundary, but are refused water and sewer services from the closest provider of each in writing.
Second.
Motion is second. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Can you raise your hands so I know who's saying aye? Did you get an aye?
Yeah, I got that.
All those opposed? All right. Motion fails. I do think we still have third reading to go, so I would like for us to continue the conversation and let's get some more details about doing the low impact. I think it was unanimous in our workshop that we look at the low impact and make sure that we do that in a consistent way. Now, we need to have a vote on the main motion. Are there any other amendments at this time? Now we'll move on the main motion with the amendments that were included. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Council to consider second reading of an ordinance to amend York County Code of Ordinances, Chapter 31, County Policies, Section 31.01, rates, fees, and charges for zoning appeals, applications for variances, rezoning requests, permits, inspections, plan reviews, and other applications, procedures, and services rendered by the York County Planning and Development Department and the York County Engineering Department, to retitle the section Land Development Fee Schedule, to create fees for new procedures pursuant to revisions to the zoning code and land development code, to revise and reorder the fee table and table notes, to provide for a public hearing, and to provide for other matters relating thereto.
Second.
We need a motion first.
Move to approve.
No, sorry, move to approve.
And a second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in
Got
favor?
ahead of myself.
Mr. Roddy.
I have a quick question. I know we're talking about the fees and everything. I've gotten a lot of calls on turnaround time. And how are we looking with the turnaround time when people are applying for these permits and stuff? What's our turnaround time? Are we getting a lot of them where we taking longer to get to them? Because I hate to be increasing fees, but then it takes somebody an extended period of time.
By and large, the fees are more being adjusted to be more equitable. There's not a uniform, all fees are increasing. But we have very aggressive timeframes. Working in other jurisdictions, our timeframes to get things reviewed and approved are about a third of what I've seen elsewhere. And especially on resubmittals, we have a very aggressive timeframe to get things turned around quickly. That being said, obviously with COVID and vacancies, we are going to lag behind sometimes. And this is one of those years where on average, we probably have added a day or in some cases 2 to the review time over years prior. But I'm hoping once COVID ebbs finally and we get more of our vacancies filled on a consistent basis, that problem will go away.
So there's a need to hire some more people. So we're hiring too, I guess. All right.
Plenty of jobs out there. Any other discussion on this?
I would just like to ask if you feel, if the vacancies were filled, do you feel you've got adequate staff to be able to keep up with this? Because this is a big area of the county. We need to make sure you're staffed properly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, once the code changes go into effect, we might need to monitor and closely monitor how that impacts our review, because our staff is essentially going to have to throw out everything they know and look at what council adopts and review that. So it's going to take a steep learning curve there, and then we'll assess on a rolling basis how we are responding to those changes and whether we need to add anybody. We're anticipating maybe changing a position to have some more review in the zoning section, but adding a new position, I'm unsure at this moment, but we'll definitely keep a close eye on it.
Budget's coming, so that's
That's
why I
right.
asked.
That's exactly right.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Council to consider amending and second reading of an ordinance to redistrict and redefine the voting districts within York County through reapportionment as to population of the 7 single-member electoral districts within the county for the election of members of York County Council pursuant to the United States Census of 2020 and in compliance with Section 4-9-90 of the South Carolina Code of Laws 1976 as amended to amend Section 11.04 of the York County Code to codify the block information pertaining to the new districting and to adopt the conforming redistricting map and to provide for other matters relating to the redistricting and reapportionment of county council districts in York County.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Now we move to item 9 that was in consent. Council to consider amending and third reading of an ordinance amending Chapter 56 of the York County Code of Ordinances, nuisances, littering, to rename Chapter 56 as public nuisances, to rename, renumber, reorder, and clarify the requirements for nuisances throughout Chapter 56, to relocate and consolidate the legislative findings to the introductory provisions of the chapter where possible in order to provide clarity and uniformity as to the purpose and approach for addressing all actions or conditions which constitute a public nuisance, to provide a general definition section for those terms or phrases applicable to the entire chapter, and to define certain terms, including but not limited to public nuisance, responsible party, and abatement therein, to provide for uniformity in procedures for serving notice of a violation or complaint, to clarify procedures by which the county may address inability or unwillingness to abate a public nuisance, to clarify and amend the penalties for failure to abate a public nuisance, including but not limited to applicable fines and abatement action by the county in conjunction with the placement of a lien for the cost of such abatement to be collected in the same manner as delinquent taxes, to provide for an emergency abatement process for nuisances constituting an imminent threat to the public health, peace, safety, or to the environment, and to provide for other matters relating thereto.
I'll move to approve with condition that Chapter 56.71 and 56.74 will be brought back for amendment for clarifying the language on burning distance.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yeah, so rather than defer this whole thing, I just think we need a little further clarification. I was going to try and make this better by addressing the exemptions, but there's actually there's more to it than that. So just want to have at probably our next meeting an update to amend the distance that is required, to change that maybe to no distance required for burning between residences.
Okay. Any other discussion? Any other questions? All in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. We do not have any new business. Council member, new non-agenda comments. Mr. Winkler.
As I said in the invocation earlier, I'd just like to publicly say again, thank you to all of our line workers and utility workers and stuff who got out in that weather that I know I wouldn't want to be out in working, trying to make sure power was kept operating or getting it back for those of us who lost power. And as always, thank you to our first responders who were out in all that nasty weather, cutting up trees and limbs across roads and working wrecks and other things. So, thank you.
Mr. Winkler. Yeah. Ms. Love.
I just want to say a little special thanks to a couple guys that work for the county in our enforcement. I have a very elderly gentleman with a little dementia in my district who called me one day. I think he called me on a Sunday, and he's had some ongoing issues with a neighbor. So I talked to George Wilmore, who talked to Eddie Broom, And they went out the next day and addressed the situation going on beside him. And it was kind of cute because the gentleman who well, they're all my constituents, of course, but the gentleman who was having the issue called me a couple of days later, and he goes, I don't know what happened, but it's like a miracle. They're cleaning up everything. And so I know what happened, and that was that York County went out and took care of that. So I just want to say thanks to them for getting, and they went the next day getting right on that. So thank you.
I was going to say real quick, a big shout out to the City of Rock Hill, SCDOT, and all of York County Public Works who jumped out and got our roads back in a decent and operating order. I worked third shift over the weekend, night shift, and when I got off that morning, they were on it every single day. When they were anticipating the snow coming in, they were out when the sleet and rain and snow hit, and they were still out on Monday as well. So big kudos to everybody who played a part in getting our roads back in decent shape. I just wish the kids would have went to school today. I needed to get some rest. My son, he was at home playing that video game. So next time, let's get on board with the school district and get these kids back to school. Also, I was informed tonight, me and Allison was informed that we're looking for some volunteers for keeping York County beautiful for District 4 and District 2. So we have a few vacant spots to help us keep this county. Oh,
and I'll piggyback on that. District 3 needs someone as well.
It's York County forever. I thought it was keeping York County beautiful. I made a bad note. York County forever. So we have a few volunteer spots if anybody looking to give up some time and their talents. And also hope everybody, even in spite of the snow and all and ice yesterday, typically what we like to see on MLK Day is we try to implement a day of service to get out in the community and do some goodwill, some positivity. But due to the snow and ice, I think a lot of people are transferring those day of service over to this weekend. So if you get a chance to get out in the community and do something good and positive, but the weatherman/weatherwoman is anticipating more snow. So hopefully we can get through this bad winter storms that we got coming through, and everybody can get out and provide their day of service to the community.
I just want to say, it seems like every day we post a new opening for a new job in York County across every department and a variety of skill sets. So I just want it to be known that York County is hiring. And if you or a loved one or someone you know is looking for gainful employment, please feel free to go to the county's website and search for job openings and find one that would suit you. Because like I said, there's openings across a wide variety of skill sets and in several departments.
Mr. Audit?
Yeah, so first of all, I do also want to thank, first responders, the South Carolina DOT, everybody that was out there, during the storm in addressing concerns and wrecks and whatever may have occurred. I do, again, want to thank you all. Just to piggyback a little bit off of what Joel said too, as we work forward to get people opportunity or help to bring jobs into the area, the York Tech is really working hard in order to work towards job force readiness. There's some great opportunities for people of all ages out there to, if you're looking to do a new career, there's certifications, et cetera. So again, I do want to give a shout out to that program and the opportunities, as Joel was saying, in employment in York County. So thank you all. Appreciate it.
Mr. Guffey?
January 17th, 2018, we lost Mike Doty here in York County. It's hard to believe that it's been 4 years ago, but all I can ask is that everyone in the community make sure that you are letting your law enforcement know how much we appreciate them. We were really brought together as a community, and I think everyone's done a great job. We just should not forget and carry on that respect and our pride for our sheriff's department, our local municipalities. Just make sure that we don't forget. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Guffey. I think we all share that we will not forget. Anyone else? We just got news today of an audit that shows that we are running tip-top. We have an excellent report, and in fact, in the packet that we received, which is very big, there's actually something in there, a certificate of achievement for excellence in financial reporting that was presented to York County, and I want to thank Kevin Madden, his crew, and David Hudspeth, and that's one area that I think our council really relies on. You do an excellent job, and we appreciate the work that you do to make sure that we keep things running healthy and that the public has confidence in the work that we're doing and the numbers that we have here. I also wanted to let the council know, I think I mentioned this last time, but I didn't realize how far along it was. I received some communication from Lieutenant David Fry, who works with the Sheriff's Department, about the homelessness discussions that are happening, and they're much further along and they're happening much faster than I realized they were. He reached out to make sure that our council was aware of that, and I believe he reached out to some other council members as well about the group that is growing and the discussion about whether or not and to what extent the county may need to be involved in those discussions. The Sheriff's Department's there, and there's plenty of other groups that were represented. The Catawba Area Coalition for Homelessness is a group that they're talking about merging with. And so at this point, I think it would be appropriate to make sure that we have someone taking a look at that, and come back to council with some recommendations and some feedback and information on that. If nothing else, to avoid duplication of efforts when some of us are getting approached about helping provide security for some of the nonprofits in the area. Legal has reminded us that we need to make sure, just like we did with the nuisance ordinance, we need to make sure before we have third reading on the ordinance that we all agreed to amend to update the names and the classifications for Planning and Zoning Committee and Economic Development Committee. We can't have third reading until that goes to the Justice and Public Safety Committee. So at this time, I want to make sure that we refer that matter to the JPS Committee, as well as taking on some role with researching that Catawba Area Coalition issue and taking some information. I believe Lieutenant Fry would like to come and is prepared to come sit down and share some information with you all, just bring you up to speed so that we all can get updated as a whole. Brandon, I believe that's your committee, so we'll be referring to that. We do not have any citizen concerns. Do we have a motion for executive session?
We do. I move that we go into executive session for, well, there's several reasons tonight. One is a contractual matter relating to a water and sewer system study update. Also for the receipt of legal advice relating to another contractual matter relating to jail agreements. Also for the receipt of legal advice relating to Blue Granite and an update. For the receipt of legal advice regarding another contractual matter relating to Riverview Road. Also for the receipt of legal advice relating to another contractual matter regarding legal representation waiver request. We have two additional items in addition to the ones that are previously on our agenda. One is for the receipt of legal advice relating to our ongoing opioid litigation. That's specifically the Janssen and distributor cases. Also for another contractual matter regarding a potential property acquisition.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, we will move directly into executive session. If session, no action was taken. Do we have any motions?
There are four motions. The first motion is to authorize our county attorney to prepare and, if necessary, file a declaratory judgment regarding municipal jail fee agreements as discussed in executive session.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes.
Our second motion is to authorize our county attorney to execute a waiver form for Attorney Jim Price with Nexum Pruitt.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes.
Our third motion is to authorize county management to negotiate acquisition of an agency office as we discussed in executive session.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes.
Our fourth and final motion is relating to our ongoing opioid litigation, and it is a motion to direct our county attorney to execute a settlement agreement as we discussed in executive session.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.